I'm PJ, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm this academic year, so from September till about June or so, I'm working with the University Chaplaincy, which covers University of Liverpool and John Moores. So I'm interning with them, which is a very vague thing. And then I have a placement here at St Bride's, which is equally vague. I do things, is what I do. But yes, so why am I up here today, I guess is the question. This Sunday, today, 19th of February, is Student Sunday, which is a thing done by, it's a universal day of prayer for students. It's a global thing, and Student Christian Movement, who we're linked with as a church, call it Student Sunday. So I figured it was probably a good time for me to actually explain a little bit about what I do, why I'm here, why you see me floating around doing bits and bobs, and yeah, why I think it's important. Sorry, just giving Warren evils because he's taking pictures of me. So yeah, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about what student experience in Liverpool is like and what Christian student experience in Liverpool is like, because I think it's something that's changed quite fast. You know, it's not what it was even 5 years ago, I don't think. And I was in my first year 4 years ago, but let's not talk about that. So I guess, yeah, I've got a few statistics that SCM put in their leaflet from a whole bunch of places. Let me know if you want citations. I fully appreciate that random facts are fake news. So in their little pack of resources, they say that there are 2.3 million students in Britain, and 428,000 of those are international students. In Liverpool, we have about 50,000 in the city centre and 56,000 if you include Hope as well. Which one should, because Hope are lovely as well. So that's approximately 10% of the population of Liverpool is students. And the vast majority of those are slowly but surely moving into the city centre. They're moving into our parish, they're moving into a stone's throw of here, into more expensive, less friendly accommodation, by and large. So then SCM did a survey of students who identify as Christian. So of 4,500 students who were surveyed, 75% said they're not part of a church or Christian student society or anything. Just over 55% of students as a whole said that they were spiritual but not religious, whatever that means. And only 2% said they had connected with their university chaplaincy. Teeny tiny numbers. So basically, my friends is the level we're talking. So in other words, 3/4 of Christian students are what my boss Ryan has called spiritually homeless. Over half of students are spiritual but not religious, so maybe you could call them spiritually homeless as well. And that 2% is very, very few students. For us, very few students come into the chaplaincy. Like we have Faith Express, which is a couple of rooms that we call the chaplaincy that covers all of those 50,000 students. We have 2 rooms and an office. And very few people use that space. It's not somewhere where we connect with students by and large. So we tend to think of ourselves as floating chaplains. We go to them. You know, we're in the Guild of Students, in the Liverpool SU, we're in coffee shops and bars, and, you know, we don't by and large use the chaplaincy. So, which is a very different dynamic to how university ministry worked even 20 years ago. And again, it's something quite specific to very secular institutions. Right, where are we? So then we get kind of generic student experience. So there was an NUS survey that showed 1 in 5 students said they suffered mental health problems. I'd say the number is actually a lot higher than that, but this is just the ones who would tick it on a survey. And then this one, 4 out of 5 students worried about money. So, you know, I think it's something that's happened, especially since fees have gone up. But there's some other factors as well that students, you know, the ones I know and the ones I went to uni with, by and large, we're not treated as people. We're treated as commodities. We're treated as things who will give the university money. And by and large, there is very poor pastoral support. It's there. It is there. There's a counselling service. The Guild, for example, have an advice service. But by and large, students have to fend for themselves. Those are very small services for a very great number of students. So this is kind of where chaplaincy steps in, or where chaplaincy can step in if it's done right. The Methodist chaplain, Rebecca Miller, was going to come this morning, but she's not feeling well. But she wrote a blog last week about, what was the title? What is a Chaplain? About her experience of chaplaincy when she was at Hope, and then now as a chaplain herself. So I'm just going to read you what she's written last week. So it's not as relevant as it would have been if I quizzed her, but I think it still speaks into this conversation. Okay, so she says, I am asked what is a chaplain multiple times a week in a whole host of settings. Students I'm working alongside, my friends and family, or even in the backseat of an Uber. Sometimes I even find myself asking that question. I first came across chaplaincy when I started university. I was unsure what they did, other than be friendly, slightly religious, and make a cracking brew. I considered myself as someone who kind of had their life together and didn't particularly need the kind of support they were offering. Boy, was I wrong. About 5 weeks into my undergraduate degree, my dad passed away, and this shook me to my core and truly broke my heart. I felt like my whole world had been flipped upside down, and I just didn't know what to do. After a month or so, I decided to come back to university and try to continue my studies, as if burying my head in books and freshest nights out would solve all my problems. But this was hard. I was hurting. I'd yet to find a church. And whilst my friends were an incredible help and support, I felt really lost. Then I heard that still, small voice, not quite of the Lord, but of a chaplain, offering a listening ear, a safe space, and a cracking brew. It was then that I began to really notice what the chaplaincy was. It was a space to come and relax and to simply be. They provided care and compassion. They gave me space to be angry and upset, a space to stress about my studies and halls of residence, and a space to feel truly valued and loved. As someone who'd been deeply passionate about their faith before losing their dad, it was something I was keen to root myself back in, but I just couldn't. They provided opportunities to help me pray, to help me find a church, and to just generally support me in the many ups and downs of university life. To help me get my faith back on track allowed me to ask those hard and at times painful questions that I was wrestling with. I'm not sure if I would have come out the other side of my degree if it had not been for the university chaplaincy. I certainly wouldn't have got a job there. So when people ask me, what is a chaplain? I say a few things. I say they offer a safe space for students from all walks of life to be themselves and to be loved. They provide spiritual guidance and walk alongside people in their journeys. They offer a listening ear and a shoulder to cry on. They strive to be love incarnate for those we meet and serve, and mess it up a lot, but we're only human after all. And at the end of the day, they make a cracking brew. So those are some of Becca's thoughts on kind of that mental health aspects of chaplaincy, that supporting role. And one of the things she mentions that I also find really important is the role of a church in that. For me, when I was a student, by and large, it was St. James, but also Open Table. And that role is something that I find really important to kind of what does church offer to student life. I think it's very easy as someone who's not a student to see students as kind of this hulking mass that exist in the university and then come out and annoy us all in bars and coffee shops, and you're not wrong. I accept that. But at the same time, they are people who've by and large just moved away from home, are in a brand new city, are a little bit lost, a little bit confused, and especially when the university is generally very poor at offering support in those struggles. I think especially for those, 3/4 of Christian students who don't find a church, and for those spiritual but not religious students, I think there is a real space for a church like this to step into that gap, or potentially to offer support to those slightly spiritually homeless students. So what in my experience has being part of a church offered? Well, community would be the first thing. One of the things that I found quite unique in my student experience compared to my peers who didn't go to church was that I knew people who were older than me. I knew children. I knew, I had peers who were parents. Not everyone I knew was 18 to 25, which is actually a really, really valuable thing that is very, very easy for someone like me to take for granted. But I didn't have that in my first year, and I missed it. Someone who's 2 years older than you can't offer the kind of support that someone who's 30 years older than you can. And you can't, grow and learn as a person if you're never surrounded by children and have no one to teach. My personal life, living with friends who have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, has put a slight dent in that philosophy. But anyway. So I do think that an intergenerational aspect of community is so important and so easy to take for granted when you're not just in a bubble of people your own age. As mentioned, that pastoral support. Here we have a pastoral group, which I think is really, really valuable. And, whatever church you're at, there is someone you can talk to. There is a framework for support. So you don't get to the point where you're calling up the uni counsellors and they're like, oh, we've got a month and a half waiting list. There's someone to step in before you get to that point, which again is something you just don't get as part of normal university student experience anymore. Specifically, maybe more to here, you have an incredibly inclusive welcome. There are no doors, there are no barriers. Doesn't matter who you are, how old you are, your sexuality, anything. You can just step in and be part of this. Which is something really valuable. The theme for Student Sunday this year was all are welcome, which we've got bits of that in the liturgy this morning, which I just think is a really, really lovely thing. And then I think there's something specifically about St. Bride's, my thoughts on what we can offer is that progressive spirituality, that space to question faith rather than it be something subscribed. I think that maybe has a lot to speak to those students who haven't yet found a church. So those are kind of my thoughts on maybe what church and what we can offer. But those are just my 2 cents. I'm sure you all have plenty of other ideas. So if in a minute you could get into small groups, I'll give you a couple of questions or kind of ideas to discuss. I've said what I maybe think we can offer. But what do you think we can offer? So what do you think as an individual you could maybe offer to help us welcome students? Because at the minute we're really bad at it, despite me being here, attempting. So what do you think you could offer to students if they were part of our community? How do you feel you could have that relationship with a younger person or with someone who's moved away and is finding their feet in the city? And then on the 1st of March, we're having a meal here for students. It is Ash Wednesday, so I appreciate you might have better things to do. So that's one thing that we're going to do, and you're all very welcome to come to that. I think it would be great if we could have a mix of people there. I don't want it to just be under 25s, please. So that's kind of one step that I'm taking to help welcome students into this space. But what do you think are some other practical steps we could maybe take? Just have a discussion around that. Just 5-10 minutes of discussion in small groups, and then feedback and tell me what you've come up with.